go back to Africa. Now!
Have you ever wondered where racism actually comes from? We've all been taught that it's just this natural, awful part of being human. You know, the people are just prejudiced.
But what if I told you that the very idea of race itself and the whole system of racism wasn't something that just happened?
What if it was invented? My argument is quite simple. Racism isn't natural. It's a technology. It's a tool that was built to solve a problem. And by the end of this video, you'll see why it was created, who it was created by, and how it continues to shape our world today. Now, before we begin, let's get one thing straight. Prejudice, judging someone before you know them, is as old as time. People have always looked at outsiders and said, they're different from us. The ancient Greeks thought anyone who wasn't Greek was a barbarian. People from one village might have hated people from the next one over. They might have discriminated against them, fought them, and even enslaved them. But here's the key difference. They weren't doing it because of a made-up biological hierarchy. Their conflicts are based on things like religion, where you came from, or which tribe you belong to. Even in our most ancient history, when early humans spread across the globe, they lived in small, isolated groups. They fought, sure, but it was more about territory and resources. It was us versus them, but them was the group from the next valley over, not people with a different skin color. The concept of race simply didn't exist because people hadn't created the social and economic need for it yet.
One of the first questions I asked was, where did this idea of being a white person come from in the first place? Science is clear. We are one human race. We're all related, all descended from a common ancestor in Africa. Some people walked out of Africa into colder, darker places and lost a lot of their melanin, some of us more than others.
Think about it. For centuries, the English saw the Irish not as a different quote-unquote race, but as savage, unchristian, and uncivilized. They were discriminated against, but the thought of it didn't come because they were biologically inferior due to their skin color. The same goes for the long conflicts between Muslims and Christians. It was all about faith and not about a scientific-sounding racial ladder. People could convert, change sides, and assimilate. But then, everything changed. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Europe started sailing across oceans, and they ran into a new kind of problem. And that kind of a problem required a brand new solution. That solution was the invention of race. When the 15th and 16th centuries rolled around, Europe started sending ships across the Atlantic. They stumble upon the Americas, and suddenly there's a huge demand for resources. Gold, silver, tobacco, sugar, you name it. But there's a big problem. Who's going to do all the backbreaking labor to get these resources? At first, they tried to enslave the indigenous populations, but that didn't work out so well for the Europeans for a few reasons, disease being a big one. So they looked elsewhere for a workforce. What happened next was this system called indentured servitude. Basically, people from Europe, mostly poor folks, would sign a contract. They'd get a free ticket to the Americas, and in return, they'd work for someone for a set number of years, usually 4 to 7. After that, they were free and could even get some land. Now here's a crucial point. Black people were also part of this system as indentured servants. Early on in the colonies, you had both white and black people working side by side under these contracts. They faced similar hardships, and there wasn't this strict racial divide that we know today. They even socialized and, yes, sometimes even rebelled together. Fast forward to 1676 and Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia. This was a major turning point. Poor white and black indentured servants, fed up with the wealthy elite and their broken promises, joined forces and revolted. They burned down Jamestown. This scared the absolute daylights out of the ruling class. They realized that a united poor workforce, regardless of their background, was a massive threat to their power and wealth.
Tobacco drastically changed the fortunes of the struggling Virginia colony. It also created a class divide that led to a violent revolt called Bacon's Rebellion. By the 1670s, wealthy plantation owners controlled the best land in the colony, forcing poorer farmers and laborers to the colony's perimeter. There, they lived under the constant threat of potentially hostile Native Americans.
And so people who moved out to the west part of Virginia felt that they were being essentially put in danger by having to live out near these very, very powerful Indian people. And they also felt that it was unfair that that the large planters who'd been in the colony for a long time were sitting on these huge plantations of which they were only using a portion.
So what was their solution? They needed to divide and conquer. They needed a way to make sure that poor white people felt like they had more in common with the wealthy white elite than with the black laborers they were working alongside. This is where the invention of race as a social hierarchy really kicks in. They began passing laws that gave poor white people new rights and privileges, creating a buffer class between the wealthy elite and the enslaved black population. This included things like giving poor white men the right to vote, access to land, and the right to own guns, while systematically stripping these very same rights from black people. They started to solidify the idea that blackness was inherently tied to servitude and inferiority. It was a deliberate strategy to create a permanent, easily identifiable underclass, a source of cheap labor that could be controlled through the ideology of racial difference. This is the birth of chattel slavery based on race in the Americas. And to make this horrific system stick, they needed a really good story to justify it. That's where our next part comes in, the messed up science of race. The ruling class now has this new system of racial slavery. They've divided poor people and created an underclass based on skin color. But a system this brutal, where one group can own another for life, and that status is passed down to their children, can't just exist without a powerful story to back it up. They needed a way to make it seem natural, even inevitable. They needed to use science to sell a lie. During the same period as the Enlightenment, the age of reason and scientific discovery, a Swedish botanist named Carl Linnaeus came along. He's famous for creating the system we use today to classify all living things, animals, plants, etc. It's called taxonomy.
The trick of taxonomy is basically figuring out where all those branches of the evolutionary tree are and finding some convenient labels to help us understand all of these remarkable interrelationships. It's mostly about helping humans understand it because it's way too complicated without structure.
But when it came to humans, he did something different, because instead of classifying them, he ranked them. He created 4 categories for humans based on where they lived and what he saw as their personality traits. He called them Americanus, red, Europaeus, white, Asiaticus, yellow, and Afar, black. And he didn't just describe them, he assigned them character traits, with Europaeus at the top as the most intelligent and noble, and Afar at the bottom, described as lazy and governed by custom. This wasn't based on real science. There was no genetic evidence to support this, but it gave the people in power exactly what they needed, a seemingly official, scientific justification for the racial hierarchy they had created. Even after these so-called scientific theories were completely debunked by real science, the damage was done. The idea of race had become deeply embedded in society. It was written into laws, like those that enforced segregation and denied people the right to vote. It shaped culture, leading to stereotypes and discrimination that became part of everyday life. This fabricated science became the foundation for a very real and very lasting system of racial hierarchy.
For 200 years, scientists poked and prodded, measured and mapped the human body, searching for a biological basis to race. Some measured facial angle to illustrate the proximity of races to the primitive. Others calibrated skull size to identify those with superior or inferior intelligence.
You'll find articles in the medical literature about the Negro ear, and the Negro nose, and the Negro leg, and the Negro heart, and the Negro eye, and the Negro foot, and it's every single body part.
So here's the big takeaway. We've seen that racism wasn't something that just naturally appeared. It was created for economic reasons. A strategic move by the powerful to solve their labor problems and protect their wealth. And to make this brutal system seem okay, they used fake, so-called scientific theories to justify it. Understanding this history is so important because it changes how we see things today. It shows us that racial categories and the problems they cause aren't just about individual people being hateful. They're part of a larger system that was built centuries ago. We need to look at the big picture and recognize that racism is woven into our laws and culture. This means that if racism was built by people, it can also be taken apart by people. The first step to dismantling this system is to understand how it was put together in the first place. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos that challenge what you thought you knew, hit that subscribe button.